The US nuclear bomb is more than just a weapon. It marks the moment when humanity first pressed the button, asking, what if we could wipe out a city in seconds? It all began with the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, a secret race among scientists, military personnel, and geniuses who worked to turn a formula into a catastrophe. Leading the effort was J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who later looked at the result and said, "Now I am become death." The first demonstration, the Trinity test, a desert in New Mexico. An explosion so powerful that even those who created it paused for a second to wonder, do we really have this under control? And then, the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. 2 cities, 2 flashes. Tens of thousands of people vanish faster than you can blink. It wasn't just the end of the war, it was the beginning of a new era of fear. The principle is simple and terrifying, the splitting of the atom. When the nuclear splits, energy is released that nature itself had previously held. And if you do it right, or wrong, depending on which side you're on, you get an explosion that turns buildings into shadows on the walls. Today, the US nuclear arsenal is not just one bomb, but an entire system: intercontinental missiles, submarines, and strategic bombers. It's called the nuclear triad, because if someone decides to press the button, the response will come from all directions. Modern warheads are more powerful than those dropped on Japan. And most importantly, there are many of them. So many that it's no longer about winning a war, but about making war impossible. The Tiger I tank represents the moment when Germany decided, let's just build a tank that no one can penetrate. It appeared in 1942, when Nazi Germany realized that its standard tanks were no longer effective against the Allies, and especially against the Soviet T-34. The answer was simple: make something bigger, heavier, and more formidable. It weighed about 57 tons. Its armor was so thick that most guns of the time simply bounced off it. And most importantly, the 88mm gun. The very one that turned enemy tanks into scrap metal before they even realized where the shots were coming from. On the battlefield, the Tiger was like a boss in a video game. A single tank like this could hold an entire sector, and the Allies were genuinely afraid to face it. Sometimes, to destroy a single Tiger, they had to sacrifice several tanks. But there's a catch. It was slow, temperamental, and broke down more often than anyone would have liked. Its enormous weight meant problems with axles, mud, and transport. And production was expensive and complicated. While others were churning out tanks by the hundreds, Germany was assembling Tigers almost entirely by hand. The crew consisted of 5 men, who sat not inside a vehicle, but in a metal vault with a gun. If you're in a Tiger, you're the hunter. If you're up against it, you're already a bit of the prey. The romance ends when you realize, yes, it was terrifying. But wars aren't won by the scariest toys, but by the ones there are simply more of. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighter represents the moment when Japan decided, we don't need armor, we need the perfect killing machine for the skies. It was developed in the late 1930s for the Imperial Japanese Navy, and immediately became a nightmare for anyone who took to the skies against it at the start of the war. The main idea was maximum lightness, almost no armor, minimal pilot protection, but in return, insane maneuverability and a range that no one else had at the time. The Zero could twist and turn in the air as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Its armament consisted of 20mm cannons and machine guns, enough to tear apart any fighter of the time with a couple of precise hits. At the start of World War II, it dominated. Allied pilots tried to fight it fairly, and quickly realized that was a mistake. The Zero almost always won in dogfights. But then everything changed. The Americans stopped playing by its rules. Instead of turns, speed, altitude, and hit-and-run attacks. And suddenly it became clear, if you hit a Zero, it burns. Fast. Very fast. Because that maneuverability came at a price, a lack of protection. No proper armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. One lucky shot, and the plane turns into a fireball. By the end of the war, it had also become a symbol of the kamikaze, when the pilot, by definition, never returns. The T-34 tank represents the moment when the USSR declared, "We don't need a perfect tank. We need a tank that will survive anything and come back for more." It appeared in 1940 and immediately became a headache for the enemy. When the Germans first encountered the T-34, they truly didn't understand what kind of beast it was. The key feature was balance. Sloped armor that deflected shells. Wide tracks to traverse terrain where others got stuck. A diesel engine that wouldn't catch fire from a single hit. And all of this in a vehicle that could be mass-produced by the thousands. The gun, first 76mm, then 85mm, not the most fearsome in the world, but enough to penetrate anything standing in its way. And if it didn't penetrate, another T-34 would roll up. And another. And another. On the battlefield, it wasn't a boss like the Tiger. It was spam. It was faster, simpler, cheaper. You could fix it in the field with a hammer and a curse word. Crews sometimes learned to operate it right in the heat of battle. That's how quickly they were sent to the front. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Poor visibility. Cramped inside. At first, many tanks didn't even have radio communication. And if you're inside, the comfort level is about the same as being in a metal box that's being shaken and shot at. But here's the thing. The T-34 wasn't supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be everywhere. The Thompson submachine gun was the moment when the US said, "Let's make a weapon that turns close combat into a meat grinder." It was invented after World War I, but it really came into its own during World War II. Soldiers simply nicknamed it the Tommy gun. Its main feature is its rate of fire. It literally spits out bullets in bursts so fast that the sound turns into a continuous crackle. In close combat, this meant one thing: whoever pulled the trigger first survived. The cartridge is the .45 ACP. Heavy and powerful, it doesn't just wound, it stops. If it hits, it's game over. And yes, that very same drum magazine. It looks cool, weighs a ton, and makes the weapon even heavier. Later on, standard box magazines were used more often, because lugging around a drum is a dubious pleasure. It weighs about 4 to 5 kilograms. That's a lot. A lot for an infantry weapon. But soldiers loved it anyway, for its reliability and for how it talks to the enemy. The problem was that it was expensive to manufacture. Too complex, too beautiful for mass warfare. So over time, it began to be replaced by simpler and cheaper models. But in urban combat, in the trenches, in buildings, the Thompson was king. The AK-47 assault rifle represents the moment when the Soviet Union said, "We need a weapon that always works, even when everything else has already broken down." It was designed by Mikhail Kalashnikov in the late 1940s, after World War II had ended. The experience of war had shown that a soldier doesn't need the most accurate weapon, but the most reliable one. And in this regard, the AK-47 is simply unrivaled. It fires in mud, in sand, in snow. You can drop it, submerge it, bury it. It will still work. You can take it apart and put it back together in minutes, even if you don't really know what you're doing. The 7.62 by 39mm cartridge is powerful and has great penetration. It's not the most accurate at long ranges, but in real combat, that's not necessary. The main thing is that the bullet reaches its target and does its job. The rate of fire is about 600 rounds per minute. Control is average. But the effect is very clear. It's cheap. Very cheap. And that's exactly why it's everywhere. Dozens of countries, millions of units, endless conflicts. The AK became more than just a weapon. It became a symbol. So much so that it even made it onto the flag of Mozambique. The irony is that this weapon of peace after the war became one of the main tools of all subsequent wars.